Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we'd love to hear where you think we got things right and where you think we got things wrong, which you can do by visiting unsilentpodcast.com. You can visit our Rumble channel or other social media channels. We'd love to hear back from you. So, Brian, what is on your mind today?
Well, I got a couple little things. Something I just saw that I thought was kind of funny online was a guy talking on Twitter about how when he needs help with something, he goes to Reddit. And maybe you can take a minute and explain to people what Reddit is. You would know that better than me. And while you do that, I just realized I didn't move my light. I'm going to go move my light while you're explaining to everyone what Reddit is.
Sounds good. Okay, this is your online tutorial moment from the Unsilent guys. So Reddit is basically, it's sort of like a social media a platform where people will talk in more long form conversations than usually you find on Facebook and other places. So it's less pictures and more more groups and discussions. You can segment yourself into subreddits, and so there's a lot of sort of long form conversations about very interesting things, and also there's a bunch of weird stuff on Reddit too. So
Okay.
that's Reddit.
All right. So I thought this was kind of an interesting little encapsulation of what it's like living in 2024. So this guy goes on Twitter and he says, and he I think he's in the IT space. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But basically he said that he uses Reddit to get help. But here's what he does. He said people aren't really interested in helping other people, but they're very interested in pointing out where somebody's wrong. So he has two Reddit accounts. He has a Reddit account where he goes and poses a question. And then from his separate Reddit account, he goes in and puts an answer he knows is completely wrong. And then the answers come from people arguing with the answer that's completely wrong.
That's brilliant. That is actually brilliant. I love that. I think I'm going to do that. I mean, he understands the ecosystem.
He understands psychology too, and he understands the current moment.
He does. That's really, I love that. I'm going to have to, you have to send that to me. I got to see this guy.
I didn't save it. I made a note in my phone to make sure I didn't forget to talk about that. But I thought it was just fascinating. I mean, as the world is becoming more online and things like that, we don't.
Yeah.
I think I'm just this is my perspective. I'm not saying I have any science to back this up or whatever, but it does feel like we've lost kind of collectively some of that like neighborliness.
Absolutely, yes.
And used to, if you needed help, like you would trudge over the 100 yards to the farm next to you and like, hey, I need help,
Right.
fixing my shed, or my cow got away, or whatever it was, how many long time, decades ago that was. Then even as we develop suburbs and things like that, like if you ran out of milk or salt, you would go over and ask your neighbor, and like that was all fine. It feels to me like just a tremendous amount of that is gone.
It is.
And conversations online are obviously generally more argumentative, or it's just tribalism unfolding. People in your tribe agree and support, people not in your tribe argue. But if you really do need help with something, like you're kind of in a spot where you're kind of left out in the alone. And his solution, I agree with you, I thought was pretty brilliant. And worth noting for Kenny G in the future, like, because people are going to look, be wondering, like, what was it like to live during that time? And I think this is a pretty good little tidbit that will tell them what this moment in time is like.
It is. I mean, and it also sort of encapsulates the dysfunction of the online community, because it's performative. All the online, the entire online community is performative. That's where, kids get in trouble on social media because they see other kids that look better than them. And so, there's a real problem in our culture in this day and age with with girls, body shaming, comparing themselves. So everything online is performative, and that is obviously going to lead to downfalls.
All right, and then I got something I'm going to spring on you here, Dave. I don't know if you see these things like I do. They come online for sure, but they are new things that are either problematic relating to racism or problematic relating to climate change.
Oh, great!
Right? So you've got to see it's like all of a sudden now, like, hey,
Hmm.
did you know that this is now racist, right?
Yes,
Or this is
exactly.
now causing climate change, right? So we're gonna play a game called racism or climate change. I'm gonna give you a term, and you're gonna tell me if you think this is causing racism or climate change. All
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And I got three here, and this is very much like the TV show Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah.
Everything's made up and the points don't matter, right?
Right.
So you
Yep.
you win nothing other than bragging rights if you get these things right. I want to be clear about that.
All right.
All right. So the first one, and the question is this causing racism or climate change? The first one is milk.
Oh gosh. Well, it's really both. I mean, because on one hand,
No, you can't. It can't be both. Yeah, I didn't. I didn't explain the rules very well in the beginning, I
okay.
guess.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to go with climate change is the big one. I mean, milk is white, so there's that. But it's probably going to be climate change because, after all, cow farts are the biggest source of the doom to humanity that is yet to come.
Yeah, yeah. You would think that, but the answer is racism.
Oh, really? Oh, do tell. Do elaborate.
Yeah. Well, I didn't read the entire story because it pissed me off about three sentences in, so I stopped reading it. But in the future, we play this. I will make sure. I'll make a point to
Well, I'd
to
love to know because I put milk out of my cereal. I'd love to know how that's a racist activity. So I don't
well,
want anybody showing up at my door.
if you get on a really long ramble today, I'll Google it real quick while we're recording, and I can come back to you. Right?
Very
Okay.
good.
Next one. Quiet.
Quiet. Well, that's got to be racist. I mean,
That is
because
in fact racist.
it has to
Quiet
be.
is part of the patriarchy and part of the I did read a little this was just a few little sentences, but it's kind of like punctuality is now considered racist because
That's right.
it's a European standard or whatever.
Exactly. It's European, it's Western, so therefore it's
Okay, all
more
right, so you're one
colonial.
for one. All right, next one. Heart attacks.
Heart attacks. Heart attacks. I think that's also racist because I think that the disparity between uh, white people having heart attacks and African Americans having heart attacks, I think there's a disparity there. So therefore, it must be racist.
That one is climate change.
Climate change.
So you're one for two, and next time, like I said, if we want to, as I get these, I'll do a better job of cataloging the answers if I can do it without wanting to throw up in my mouth while
Well,
they're
Brian, I think we're going to need to, after we've done two or three of these, we're going to have to bring a DEI consultant and an environmental activist on to the show to really explain these things because I'm afraid that I'm running afoul of the of what's true and good and righteous in the world right now.
Well, DEI consultants make a lot of money, so I'm not sure our budget for this
Yeah,
podcast can
we
afford
might not be able
DEI
to afford it. That's true.
consultants just yet. Maybe someday, Dave. We'll
Yeah.
aspire to that, and one day we'll have a budget that'll support such an endeavor.
Okay. All right. Until then, I just got to be offensive.
Yeah. Okay. So you ended up one for two. You got one right and you got two wrong.
Bummer.
Good on you for knowing that quiet is racist.
That's racist. That's
right. Okay. So something that's a little more serious. There is a trend. I'm not sure if you're aware of that has to do with political affiliation and gender.
Oh, okay.
And the ideology gap is opening up, is what this headline says, between young men and young women in countries across the world. And so it shows a variety of graphs and things like that. And they're small print. It wouldn't be easy to see on the screen for people watching. But um, it shows over the last 20 years or so how political affiliation for young people is changing by gender in pretty significant ways. Now, that's pretty interesting. So in 2005, for example, in South Korea, it was pretty much the same 10% of men and 10% of women, uh, you know, claimed a political party, a conservative or progressive, right?
Right.
And I don't know what they call their parties over there. Doesn't really matter. But then it dipped down around 2008 to nearly zero for both of them.
Hmm.
And then since then, it's been kind of an uptrend for both. Women can considerably higher and men considerably lower, women leaning way more progressive and men leaning way more conservative. So
Right.
now in 2020, whatever this is from 2022, probably something like that, 2023, guessing they're a year or two behind that, when they measure this stuff, over 20% of men identify as being more conservative, and 30% of women consider themselves more liberal or progressive. So that's
Interesting.
South Korea. So almost polar opposite. 30, and this is going from 10% of each of them
Right.
identifying with a party, which happened to be a liberal party back 20 years ago. All right,
Right.
now let's talk about the U.S. So in the U.S., this graph starts in around the 80s. It looks like, and again, it's about 10% for each male and female. We're identifying with the more progressive liberal party.
Right.
Now it is just about 40% for women, and looks like about 4% for men.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a pretty big gap there. Germany, very similar, little less, about 10% of both in 1980 considered themselves progressive and liberal. Now it's about 4 or 5%. Looks like men are conservative, with compared to about 25% of females who are more progressive. And in the UK, a little different there. But it looks like about 18% around late 80s, around 1990, somewhere in there, consider themselves liberal, progressive. Kind of done like a roller coaster thing, bouncing between like 3 to 12%. It looks like for a few decades, and now about 22% of men consider themselves liberal, progressive, and over 50% of women consider themselves liberal or progressive.
Oh,
So
wow.
a pretty big a gap is being open on that graph. And this one
Yeah.
here is from a different source. This is the Survey Center of American Life. This is measuring the percentage of young men aged 18 to 29 who identify or lean towards the Democrat Party. This starts in 2016. Their data says in 2016, 51% of young men identified as Democrats, dropping to 48% in 2017, dropping to 45% in both 2018 and 2019, raising a little bit to 47% in 2020, and then steadily declining from there. 44% in 2021, 43% in 2022, and now 39% in 2023. So I think this kind of matches what I just witnessed. Now, I don't hang out with a bunch of 18 to 29-year-olds, so it's not like I have a huge sample size personally, but this does kind of seem like the mood of the zeitgeist, so to
Yeah.
speak, is
Yeah.
that young women are very much more in favor of the progressive kind of stuff, and young men are less and less. What do you think that tells us?
Well, I think there's something else. I think there's another statistic or set of statistics, observations. I don't have the exact numbers, but you'll know what I'm talking about, that you have to overlay on that to understand this. It seems to me that if you overlay fertility rates worldwide on top of this, then you start to understand what drives those numbers. And by that, I mean across the Western world. And all the nations you mentioned are Western nations. They're advanced nations of first world, right? Korea's rich, US is rich, Germany's rich. So we're all these advanced nations. And in every one of those nations, people are getting married later. Men and women are getting married later. The fertility rate is down. So they're not having as many kids and not having them as early. So if you overlay that on top of these political things, I think there's some explanatory power. I think you could connect them and say this. And I'll make some generalizations that will make some feminists mad now. So there you go. You send the DEI coordinator over to my house and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, don't
Uh,
worry. I got them on speed dial right now.
okay, that's good. We can't afford them, but you still got them. So what, when typically women are the more nurturing of the two sexes. There are two, by the way, two sexes. So there's another
Well, for the
violation.
purpose of this conversation, we'll limit our thinking to caveman days, where we only consider there's two
Yeah, like
sexes.
20 years ago. Yeah. Um, So with the two sexes, I mean, it's broadly acknowledged that in general, the normative case is that women are more nurturing than men are. And there's also biology behind this too. You and I have more testosterone running through our veins than our wives and other women around. So that makes us more aggressive, less, caring, maybe
Nurturing.
not
Yep.
caring, but probably nurturing. So
Nurturing. Yeah.
there's that biological component of that. Now, what happens when women, in the 1800s and before 1700s, you often find women, giving birth in their teens, in their early 20s. The age to, if you're 25 and not married, you're an old maid. If you don't have kids by the time you're 30, well, something wrong with you. You're a social deviant, right? So what happens when that nurturing uh, uh, impulse can't be met because you don't have kids and you're not married? So you got no person to nurture in that's come from your body. You have nobody to nurture that you're married to. You look for somebody else to nurture, and you look for a more nurturing environment. Well, the progressive culture, the progressive thought pattern is one of, I'm going to take care of you, Brian. I'm going to use
Yep.
government to take care of you. You're going to be nurtured whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I think you connect all of this, the biology and the genetics of it, the fact that we have decreasing fertility rates, and that provides to me a very logical, straight path explanation for why you find more women going in that direction.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, as a guy who works with other men and other women in my professional capacity, men have different drivers than women, no question.
Right.
And you're 100% right. Like that women want to build relationships and cultivate meaningful, friendships and other relationships and things like that. Generally speaking, again, there's exceptions to everything. So spare me the nasty grams you'll send on whatever social media channels. But generally speaking, men like fixing things.
Yeah.
Men like having a purpose that's right now, which often has to do with employment, building things, whether that's building a comfortable lifestyle where you have to go out and earn X amount of dollars to buy the new truck you want or things like that. And again, not saying that women don't have purpose. Of course they do. But you're right, where women do want this more like everyone just to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And men, I think, especially young men in their early years, again, for the young men I've been around when I was young and as I've aged, life has a way of demonstrating that people will let you down.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And when you're a guy trying to again go out and find your purpose through your career or building the life you want, you're in charge of the finances and for yourself. And again, not that women working don't contribute equally. I believe all that stuff, but men have a different way of looking at it than women do, as far
Yeah.
as like they feel a different level of responsibility that if the bills can't be paid, like it's on them, and
Yeah.
they would not be as inclined to go ask for help. They
Yes.
would be more inclined to get a second job or whatever, that
Right.
kind of thing. And over time, as we get older, I think going from a young man coming out of like high school or college or whatever, we might have altruistic ideas of having a community and a safe net of people who are going to take care of each other. But then you learn that people oftentimes don't keep their end of the bargain,
Right.
and you are kind of left on your own to figure things out. And so I think that's interesting. But how do you think this can't go on? I don't believe that in today's climate, today's vibe, I guess is a better way to say it. I
Yeah.
hate to use the word climate erroneously. Um, it seems very unlikely to me you would have a happy marriage or relationship with people in the two different camps now. Like having someone who's going to vote for Trump and someone who's going to vote for Harris. I don't know what else. I don't know what you could agree on to form a healthy marriage or long term relationship. This has to get rectified somehow. The
Well,
question
yeah.
is, which group is going to move, or both?
Well, or is I suspect, given what we the age that we're in, the generation that we're in, I think both groups will ultimately end up moving in response to societal implosion is essentially.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to happen. But I also think, to answer your previous question about how do you find the red hat MAGA wearing Trump guy with the um, you know, uh, pink shirt woman who's supporting Harris. How do they get along? Well, they probably won't get together in the first place. First of all, there was a study some years ago. It was one of the Oregon universities. I don't remember which one it was, but one of the Oregon universities talked about the things that would cause the differences between a potential spouse that would cause you to not want to date them. So there were questions of, would a Catholic, it used to be the Catholics and the Jews, they couldn't marry together because, their religion, or, in the past there was interracial marriage was thought of as taboo. It's like, you're married
Right.
somebody of a different race. Well, all of those things are kind of very, very low on the scale of, I wouldn't marry a person like this. What's very high on the scale of that in the study, and I think, we know it intuitively, but they studied it empirically, was somebody of a different party, that the family of the daughter of the Republican might not want or might object to, and the daughter might object to, the getting married or getting involved with the family of the Democrat. So,
Yeah.
and vice versa. And so that was the highest level of discrimination, was ideological discrimination. And so I'm sure there are coping mechanisms. I mean, there's therapists and counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists all over the place these days. I'm sure there's coping mechanisms, but I think it would be very, very difficult.
Yeah, I think that we talk a lot about how the battle that's been kind of unfolding, in my opinion, is about values, not policy.
Yes.
And I think that maybe 20 years ago that we were having policy discussions. Now we are not having policy discussions. They're veiled behind policy, but the real battle, if you will, is about values.
Yes.
And again, looking at a more conservative approach, which is more Judeo-Christian in based, is you got to take care of yourself. The community is there to help you, of course, but you have to do your part first.
Right.
If there's a problem in your life, like the old saying, like, the number one source of all of our problems is likely to be us.
Right. Exactly.
or the number one reason problems are as bad as they are is because of us as the individual. Like,
Yes.
I
Absolutely.
cause most of the problems in my life.
Yep.
And a person who has that mindset, as young men are drifting more towards, it looks like, is not going to share a whole lot in fulfillment of life, joy of life, with someone who has a polar opposite, which is, first they need to do their part, and then I'll kick
Right.
in.
Right.
And I just, that would affect so many facets of your relationship, your marriage, your relationship with your kids, how you raise your kids, financial obligations,
Yeah.
bonds with friends. I just now I don't know how people could have a happy. I'm sure people do. I mean, I'm sure
Sure.
there's
Sure.
tons of people, thousands probably people. There's probably not tens of millions of them like there were in 1998.
Sure. Sure.
But my point is, it's just they're fundamentally different ways to approach life. And I find it interesting that young men are drifting more towards the conservative, which is, basically, I'm responsible for my problems.
Yeah.
And young women are drifting more towards more of a progressive, which is, they need to fix their stuff first. And it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. I don't think it's anecdotal. It probably is, but I can't even count how many times a week I see on, Twitter or whatever it is, young women kind of moving towards this trad wife thing.
Oh yeah.
Now, maybe not all the way to that end of the spectrum, but there's a number of videos, like just these little 2-minute videos that go around of young women
Yeah.
saying, you know what, I was a feminist for 20 years or 10 years or 5 years or whatever, and now I don't want that. I want to have a family. I want to have a husband. And one I saw, if I can find it, maybe I'll play it in a future episode. She basically said, I want to make my husband dinner. I want him to eat healthy because I like him being around, and I want to make sure he's healthy enough to live a long life because I enjoy being around him. If that means I make him dinner, I'm happy to do it. He's working 60 hours a week, so if I mean, and she went through this whole thing and many people probably look at that like, okay, June Cleaver, like what happened to you?
Right. Yeah.
But her whole premise was, I started out leaving high school and college as wanting the opposite of those things. But what I've come to learn is I do want these things. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the groups have to move, because, biology is biology. People want to procreate and
Yeah. Right.
multiply.
Right.
Like, I just now also we talked about many months ago, you and I, the studies of the percentage of men between 18 and 35 who are having no sex at all
Right. Right.
is like 35% or something
Yeah.
like that. And now it's starting to make sense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, you have porn addiction. That's a big thing right now.
Yep.
You have video game addiction. It's a big thing right now.
Yep.
You have all these kind of addictions that keep young people of both sexes kind of in mom's basement for a prolonged period of
Right.
time.
Right.
It seems like, where they're not out meeting people, where they don't bump into people in bars and parks and church
Yeah.
and things like that anymore. So certainly that's a factor. But if you believe that you're going to go out there and meet people who are ideologically opposed to how you view life, why would you even try? This
Yeah.
all kind of makes sense, when you put it all together.
Well, and I think probably one of the major factors, like you mentioned the trad wives, I think the motivation behind that, and behind the fundamental motivation behind that, and behind the sort of progressive idea of, I'm going to get government to take care of me because I don't have a man to take care of me. It's at the end of the day, it's still there. That nurturing thing is looking at different outlets
Yeah,
to satisfy itself. So
sure.
the motivation, the deep down motivation, is still the same. The need, I should say it this way, maybe the need is still the same, but the outcome is, or the way that you try to go after that is different. Now, what I think how that would change is when in greater and greater numbers, the government's going to take care of me, and then I'm going to be fulfilled just like if a man took care of me. I think when that fails, and it always fails because government doesn't care and society doesn't care. So, maybe you've got a program that there's lots of programs, there's WIC and all these different programs that they give you stuff when you need it. And that's good that we got some stuff to give people that need it stuff, but there's no caring behind it. There's no
Yeah.
compassion behind it. There's no fulfillment behind it. And as a result of that, I think this changes, and more people come out of that mindset and say, my parents didn't have it all that bad.
Right.
It wasn't perfect, but they had a pretty good relationship, or, in some cases, yes, and some no. But when one thing fails, then the other thing comes along. And I think that's probably how that ends up evolving.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, for people listening, like there's a million variations and a million
Yep.
variables and million different scenarios, and we're not trying to. I'm not trying to paint a wide brush and say all people. I'm not
Right.
saying that at all.
No.
I do think it's interesting to see the divergence, though, in which direction each gender is going. I think it's be fascinating to see how
Yeah.
that resolves, because it seems like it'll have to resolve, or the species won't carry on
Right.
unless you're, I mean, the people in the Middle East probably don't have this problem. They'll probably do
No.
just
No.
fine. But
Yeah.
Western countries are going to have to. This is going to have to get fixed if they're going to continue, because and just I don't know how it will resolve, but it seems like it will have to get resolved, and something will happen that'll be a catalyst, probably that'll bring that all about.
Yep.
All right, last thing I got, and then I'll let you talk about AI a little bit. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the debate. I don't want to talk about the details of the debate, because I could only stomach a few minutes of it, and then I
Yeah.
had to turn it off because it just, which I didn't see how many people watched it.
There was a
I,
lot. I
I
think
don't
57
recall.
million.
Okay, so
Lot.
that's a pretty sizable
Yep.
amount. I'm trying, I'm thinking back, like when my first election, my first presidential election I voted in was 92, when Ross Perot ran against George H.W. Bush and
Yep.
Clinton. There was a debate, and I watched the debate, and I was fairly interested because Ross Perot was this like outsider anomaly. He had
Yeah.
a weird accent and like that giant sucking sound and all.
Chucking sound.
It was as much entertainment as it was.
It was.
I didn't really care about the politics, and again, as a young person, I was just like, yeah, bring the new guy in, screw the
Yeah.
establishment, like how young people think, right?
Yeah.
So I only watched a few minutes, like less than 5 minutes. I watched of the debate, but what started to become apparent to me in listening to these very different camps, and not that I need to listen to the debate, because I've heard their talking points. I kind of I know what they're about. I think I feel like I'm relatively educated about what they're each proposing,
Yeah.
and it feels to me like, and I want to see if you think that this is on target, or if I'm missing the boat here. It feels to me like the choice we have to make is, and again, I have traditional Judeo-Christian values, so I have biases, and I'm not running from that.
Yeah.
This is my perspective with those biases.
Yeah.
But it feels to me like what Harris is offering is short-term gratification, and what Trump is offering is a much more difficult long-term benefit. So I kind of liken it to, like, as a guy who my entire adult life has been on a off and again, on again weight loss journey, right? I love ice cream, and I also wish I weighed 20 pounds less. Sometimes the ice cream wins, and sometimes the longer payoff wins.
Right.
But it does feel like the more progressive folks are offering, like, hey, don't worry, we'll take care of you. You don't have to work so hard. We'll provide universal basic income. We'll do these things to take care of you. But rarely in life, in my opinion, is the short-term gratification thing the right thing. Rarely is the ice cream the right
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
The ice cream's never the right answer. In small doses, it's fine, just like what she's offering.
Yeah.
Small doses of a safety net for people, I fully support. Like, you're going to have people
Yeah.
who have physical disabilities,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, small dose of that, absolutely. But this, like, just idea that you can eat ice cream every day, and if you weigh 600 pounds, like, that's okay. That's not healthy, but it doesn't feel good in the short term to pursue the longer term benefit.
Right.
And that's kind of what this feels like to me. It feels like that's the choice that America has, and I think that's why, part of the reason why so many of us, myself included, are very reluctant to get on board with this, because no part of this is going to be easy or fun. Of
Right.
like, if we say we want independence, that means we have all the burden of responsibility of
Right.
we don't have the safety net as much. Does that seem like the choice to you as well? Like, we have the short term gratification versus long term benefit.
Yeah, I think that's at the base of all of this. I think the base of all of this is, one side says, the Harris side says, and they don't, come out and say this overtly, but they say, we'll take care of you. We'll be, they don't say we'll be big brother. We'll be big sister. We'll
Yeah,
take care of you. And here's all the list of ways we're going to give you stuff and take care of you. Now, how they're going to do that, we have no clue, because we have no clue what she actually believes or what she's actually going to do. But that's the core of that philosophy, is that we're going to take care of you. You need us to take care of you. This liberty
yeah.
thing, is not terribly important. I mean, again, they'll never say it.
And don't overlook all the existential threats that if we don't take care of climate change and
Right.
racism and all the isms, like, don't, like,
Yeah.
they're existential threats. They
Yeah.
have to take care of them.
Here's why you need me. You need me
Yeah.
because climate change and racism and homophobia and blah, 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 blah. The list of 4,322 other things that are going to kill you tomorrow. If you don't turn over your personal agency to me, if you don't give me your free will, if you don't do that, then all these things are going to get you. So, and that's what, we hear about, we're going to give you $25,000 to buy a house, or, you go this litany of things that she's just going to start, going around society with a fire hose of money and spewing on people.
That's a great example. We'll give you $25,000 right now, which feels really good.
Yeah.
And we're going to add $25,000 to the price of many houses that are going to be sold, which will inflate the entire market.
Right.
But over long term, like, that's a long term detriment.
Yeah.
But you're paying a mortgage for 30 years. Like, who cares,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's it. It's short term, and that's where our society has gotten to because of our conveniences. It's where we've gotten to because of the internet. Because I don't know something, and instantaneously I can find it and have it delivered by Amazon, in 6 hours if you live close enough to an Amazon hub. So everything is short-term gratification. And as a result of that, we want our politics to be short-term gratification. We want them to take care of us. And that's now on the other side, I could better compare it with the conservative position. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to kind of compare it with the Trumpian position because, it's got
It's a little hard sometimes.
it's a little bit hard to nail them down. But it's also interesting. I think the other kind of broad scale thing you can take away from the debate that might be useful for Kenny G is when you get to a scenario, when your society gets to a scenario when people will stand up and they will promise anything and they will say anything, even if it's been proven to be completely false and completely wrong, just to
Yeah.
get you in and get the other guy out of my way, then you know you've reached a point in your society where you where it's the political system is essentially collapsing around you. That's one of the sort of indicators, I think, that you know all of her policies have changed. If you look at her, all of her policies have changed. And you go over flip on the Trump side, and he's like, well, abortion, little this, little that.
Yeah.
You don't have. You're only playing to the crowd. It's 100% performative. And when
Yeah.
politics become 100% performative without any concrete anything behind them, your society is at a point of political collapse, essentially.
Right. And the other thing that they are asking right now, I'm speaking more of the Harris camp for sure, because I do think that despite Trump's many flaws, and he has many,
Oh yeah.
I do think that he is a believer that there's too much government, too
Oh
much
yeah.
interference,
Yeah.
too much of that. So the mechanisms the paths he follows to do things, I don't worry about that as much, because in his gut he just believes there's too much government.
Sure.
And so what the progressives are asking us to do right now is overlook the way government operates and assume that they'll have this new level of compassion and competence,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So one of the things I would ask if I was a moderator is, for a progressive candidate would be like, what are the top 1, 2, or 3 most successful, knocking it out of the park government programs we have right now?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And when they go, we're trying on the border, and we're trying to get unemployment, and we're trying to real wages, and we're trying to close the disparity of the wage gap, and like we're trying. Okay, well, let me ask a follow-up question. What are the top 1, 2, or 3 top performing government programs without using the word try?
Right.
and and I don't know if they would have any. Like I'm not being sarcastic with this. I don't know if they would have any if they were like really honest and like, well, here's the one thing we're really crushing it on, like education. Like, okay, no, taxes, no, immigration, no.
See, there's only one
So
problem with your formula, though, Brian. You said it. If they're honest. If they're
right,
honest. So you cannot expect any honesty to come in response to that question. The question would
right,
be, if somebody asks the question, say, oh, we are so successful in the economy because we've added, 9 million jobs after COVID,
yeah.
and we,
And by the way, 8.5 million of those are either government jobs or going to immigrants.
right. Or like we are killing it on the border. We've reduced border crossings by 300% since last, since we took over. So
Right.
there would be no honest answer to that because again, as a conservative,
Yeah.
you're thinking of things factually. And
Well, and so my point with this is they're offering short-term gratification instead of long-term benefit,
yes,
and they're instilling fear, and they're giving you
yes,
all these reasons why, and all you have to do is accept that miraculously it's going to be different this time.
right,
Like the level of incompetence and failure they've demonstrated for decades now is going to be gone away because this new person swears in office, who
right.
will be controlled in both sides, by the way, who will be controlled by bureaucrats who tell them things that they can't do.
Yeah, yep.
Last thing I'll say on that is I thought was super fascinating. You and I talked a couple weeks ago about RFK coming out to
Oh
endorse
yeah,
Trump, which
yeah,
was like a earthquake happening in the political zeitgeist
yep.
again. A couple days ago, our good friend Dick Cheney came out and endorsed Kamala
I
Harris,
saw that. Yeah, yeah,
and no surprise,
yeah,
RFK was a surprise,
yeah.
although I would think that they agreed on many things, but for him to come out and endorse, like, that was pretty damn bold,
It was
and he's still suffering major consequences of that. Dick Cheney will suffer zero consequences for this endorsement,
right.
and it makes perfect sense because he's part of the machine.
Yeah,
And it is shaping up, like you and I talked about, like this realignment. It's not really conservative versus liberal anymore. It's not really
yeah.
Republican against Democrat anymore. It's insiders versus outsiders is
That's right.
very much how it seems to be shaping up to me.
Yeah,
And so you got, Trump, who held office for 4 years, out of the last, let's say since George H.W. Bush took office in 88.
Yeah.
So we're going on 40 years, of which he held office for 4. So he's a little north of 10% of the time in the last 38 years or whatever it's been, or 36 years.
Right.
So 11% or whatever the time he's held office. But all these people who bookend his presidency, all are coming together to say he's the cause for all the problems.
Right.
And so all the insiders who are saying, we don't want this, we don't want the outsiders in here. These guys are
Right.
going to upset the apple cart.
Right.
And Dick Cheney endorsing Harris just was like, this is just another little indication that it's completely, for whatever reason, and I don't understand it as well as I would like, and maybe it's better I don't understand, because I'd probably be scared to death if I really did understand it. But for some reason, the insiders are just, they will not allow outsiders to have a say in how things are done. It's very much shaping up that way, in my opinion.
Well, I think it's because the institutions are the only thing they've got. They're only, the institutional power. So Cheney is a creature of the institution. Just, and most of the people, the bureaucracy is the thing that came out of World War II. So we got a lot of bureaucracy that happened out of World War II. So that is the system. And so Trump is a threat to democracy in the sense that they would say the system is democracy, the system of cabinet level positions, to agencies, to implementers, to bureaucrats, to the tentacles of the Leviathan that stretch throughout the entire culture. And Trump is a threat to that. There's no question he's a threat to that, because he's like Department of Education,
because he wants to dismantle it.
Yeah. Well, and more people are realizing how dysfunctional the institutions are, which is why institutional trust has collapsed. I mean, we still have respect for the military. There's still respect for the police, although not as high as it was, because the left has sort of abandoned that piece, except during election year. But that's institutional trust has collapsed, and that scares those that are creatures of the institution tremendously, whether it be Harvard
and next week I'm gonna bring some clips of a guy named Mike Benz, who I think really articulates the stuff well, and he talks about how in 2014 the definition of democracy went from representation of the people, representation of the people, to representation of the institutions.
Yes.
And that's academia, the media, the military industrial complex, the CIA, the blob, the whatever. That became, when they talk about democracy, that's what they're talking about. And so, as we mentioned a couple months ago, both sides are saying that they're protecting democracy, but their definitions of democracy are very different. And I think that's becoming more and more clear. And so as people see the Dick Cheneys of the world align with Harris, which every Harris supporter up until 9 days ago would have said Dick Cheney was one of the worst war criminals ever to walk the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And now they're like celebrating this endorsement, which is fascinating to watch. But this is the conflict I think that many people are probably experiencing, which is, we know the institutions are broken. We know what they're selling us is a crock of crap.
Yep.
But what they're offering is to take care of me.
Yeah.
And so wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
And so we had to suspend belief that they could actually take care of us in order to get on board with what they're selling. Deep down, I think most people, not all, most people know it's probably not going to work out as well as they like. But damn, it feels good to believe that for a while.
Well, if you have no other place to go, see, this is the thing. There's no other place. If you're a committed leftist and the institutions are failing, and I mean, where else do you go? You don't go to your community, or you don't go to church, to find that meaning and support. You don't go to your, maybe some of them go to family, but the thing about the conservative mindset and worldview is that the institutions exist to serve society, and society is things like church and family and friends and your Rotary Club and all these other organizations. That's society, and the government institutions exist only to protect that. Whereas the opposite point of view is that no, the institutions allow these other things to exist, but the government institution, bureaucracy, that's the important thing. And as a result of that, if these are collapsing, then where do you go? You have to look.
Right.
So it's like, well, she says she can fix it. She's got a nice pantsuit on. She looks nice. She's got a good smile. She's talking about hope and other happy things. Let's give her a shot, because we sure as heck can't, adopt the ways of the heathen that don't like the institutions. So I think that's a very great part of it.
Yeah. All right. Did I leave you enough time to talk about AI, or do you want to save that for another time?
Let me drop a few things in to the mix here, just because it's a big topic and it's going to impact Kenny G. I won't say a whole lot about it, but just some things that people need to understand. And Kenny G will be living with this, because who knows, maybe Kenny G will have an AI in his brain. But
Kenny G might be the CEO of Skynet. We don't know.
he could very well be, or he could be walking around in Arnold Schwarzenegger body. Who knows? Well, we'll see after he's run into by a dump truck. So I think the thing our society is facing is, and this gets back to, part of the purpose of the show is to talk about philosophy. So the AI represents the potential, at least, to extend or replace humans in doing a lot of things we do. So the question of where it ultimately lands, and where it ultimately lands for people, is going to be very much tied into however the next system develops, because AI certainly will be. There's plenty of people that say that right now AI has essentially reached super intelligence. It doesn't necessarily have conscious awareness, but really all that matters is the outcome. Whether you're talking to something and it gives you all the right answers and does all the right things, you don't care if it feels good about that or not. You care about the outcome. So, so the introduction of AI is going to change our fundamental systems of self-government as well. Let me throw some at you. So large-scale democracy was not possible before the invention of Gutenberg's press. It wasn't possible, because you could not spread ideas over a large group of people without
For
that.
those of us that didn't go to college, you mean the printing press,
The
right?
printing press, yeah. Printing
Yeah,
press.
yeah. I didn't know it was Gutenberg that invented it. So
Yeah,
just
Gutenberg invented it.
clear that up for us,
Yeah.
non-college educated folks.
Okay. Well, we learned that. Even at Evergreen, we learned that. So
Even at Evergreen.
So democracy became a possibility. Large-scale democracy became a possibility in, nothing more than about 500 years ago. Now, the Romans did a pretty good job of it back in their day, as good as best they could with scrolls and such. But even their implementation couldn't extend too far beyond their borders, because look what the Germans did to them. So,
Yeah.
so the question now is, when instantaneous information and communication will truly be available to everybody everywhere simultaneously, then how is that going to change the fundamental systems of society, of democracy? The AI has the potential of making direct democracy possible, of knowing what everybody thinks about everything, and then voting, or telling your avatar, your own personal avatar, go advocate for this, which in my estimation is very dangerous. Direct democracy, having everybody vote on everything, is very dangerous, because groupthink is sometimes right and is sometimes very, very wrong, and can lead to definite dangers.
And also, if AI continues to do what it's doing now, which is determining which opinions are okay and which opinions
Yes.
are not okay, AI would skew the results, because they would say, well, if you don't think you should have late term abortion when we had this poll, then we're not going to count those votes, because those guys are obviously nutcases, and
Right.
they're racist or whatever for saying those kinds of
Exactly.
things. So that will not be included in the data I'm going to present.
Right. Well, AI does give the potential and the reality to bias on steroids, because an AI only knows what it's trained on. It only knows the amount of text it's trained on, and it can only. Now, I will point out, there's an interesting program I found out about recently. most everything you say on any of your local, AIs, ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., you say all that stuff in the cloud. It records it in the cloud, and it knows you asked the question and it knows the answer. Now, there are AIs that are privacy AIs, just like there's privacy web browsers like DuckDuckGo and StartPage and others. There's a new one that I've been playing with that you can ask questions that our friend who's the DEI coordinator wouldn't approve of, and it stays privately on your own device. It's called Venice.ai. So that's an interesting one to play with.
Well, I think I don't know. I saw this less than 2 weeks ago. A person was talking to. Actually, I saw a couple of videos. Two different women. I think they were both women. It might have been a man and a woman. Doesn't matter. Asking Alexa, which is Amazon's, kind of AI, whatever. And I'm not sure how much AI and how much is just like a search engine. I don't know how that works with Alexa specifically, but they asked Alexa, "Why should I vote for Donald Trump?"
Oh yeah,
and the answer was, "I don't give political advice, and that's it's not my place to get involved in that." And then they immediately said, "Okay, Alexa, why should I vote for Kamala Harris?" It rambled on about, well, you could start with her great list of accomplishments and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And so,
They were
if that's the
skewered
AI
about
we're
that.
signing up for, you can count me out.
Exactly. Yeah. They were skewered on that one because that's just, talk about bias.
Well,
That's
and Google's had blunder after blunder when they give me create an image of George Washington and it looked nothing like George Washington. Whatever. It just, again, if that's the AI future we're aiming for or heading for, I might have to learn how to grow corn. I'm not.
absolutely.
Not sure that's for me.
It's going to be
All right. Well,
interesting.
hey, just to recap a couple things. Of course, Dave and I are giving our perspective, trying to explain to future generations what this moment in time is like. We certainly would like your opinion, though. There's plenty of places where we're going to not represent your views for sure. And you can come and comment, tell us where we got it right, where we got it wrong. Rumble has a great comment section. You can go to unsilentpodcast.com. Again, tell future generations how we missed the mark a little bit, or tell them how we got it right. And we really appreciate your feedback. Again, Dave and I can only give our perspective, which is limited to our personal biases and experience. So that would be great to have you all part of the conversation. And with that, until next time, this is David Bryan signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.